A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I am glad that you're with us today. Coming up on the program here in just a matter of moments, Tim Schmidt is going to join us from the U.S. Concealed Carry Association, which is headquartered, in the state of Wisconsin. That is where Donald Trump, our president, heading today. Going to be visiting Kenosha, Wisconsin. Governor Tony Evers tried to tell him, don't come. You're only going to make things worse. Not really sure how much worse things could be there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now that we have seen several days of relative calm in Kenosha after last week's increasing violence and destruction. And again, this is something that, I think Americans all across the country, not just in Kenosha, are paying close attention to. According to Tim, a growing number of Americans not only are purchasing firearms, but they are seeking out information on how to use those firearms in lawful self-defense. That's where we begin our conversation with Tim Schmidt from USCCA. Take a look and a listen. Tim, thanks so much for joining us on the program again. It's good talking with you today.
Oh, my pleasure, Cam. I always love to come on your show and talk to your amazing crowd of visitors.
Wow, we appreciate that. And speaking of amazing crowds of visitors, there have been some visitors there to Kenosha, Wisconsin recently. I noticed that the local police department said of the 175 arrests that they've made in the past week or so, more than 100 of them have been out-of-towners. I think 44 different cities represented. President Trump is heading to Kenosha today. I know that Governor Tony Evers has said to stay away, don't come. What's your take, first of all, Tim, just generally speaking, on what has taken place in Kenosha, and what do you think about President Donald Trump traveling there today?
Oh, gosh. Well, I guess the first thing I'll say is that, when it hits this close to home, it's a little more powerful. And I mean, Kenosha, Wisconsin, I've been there many, many times. It's a great little city, and to see the news coverage, it's devastating. It scares the heck out of me. I think Trump's trip is a smart one. I think that Wisconsin is still a battleground state, and the majority of folks in Wisconsin, at least certainly the ones that don't live in the big cities, they love Trump and they love what he stands for. They love that he he supports the natural born right to self-defense, and now more than ever, I mean, you can tell watching the news, this is pretty darn important when there's so much looting and rioting that you got to defend yourself. It's crazy.
It is. The first story that I wrote today for Bearing Arms was a story about a neighborhood watch that is formed in a subdivision about 10 miles from downtown Kenosha. These are, 10 to 12 folks who are armed. They're out there every night. Just making sure that, nobody's going into their neighborhood to start any trouble. They're said that they're friendly. They don't have any problem with peaceful protest. And these are folks who've lived in that community, in some cases, 18, 20 years. And they've never seen anything like this either. I know that you and the folks at USCCA very, very concerned and very interested in people being able to exercise the right of self-defense. But, as we've seen these, I don't even want to call them protests because they're not. As we've seen the rioting, as we've seen the looting, as we've seen the destruction take place in towns like Kenosha or Portland, we're now starting to see people not just protect their own homes and their own subdivisions and look out for their neighbors, but now they're going to these cities. I mentioned the number of arrests that were made from people who were out of town in Kenosha. That's happening on both sides. I mean, you're seeing, pro-police demonstrators, people who don't want to see these places burned down. They're showing up as well. And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I got to tell you, Cam, when you mentioned in the first part of this interview about the fact that I think you said 44 of the 175 arrests were people from out of town. I mean, to me, that sounds like some organized plan of shipping in these paid protesters and not just paid protesters, but paid rioters to cause problems. Now, I know that, some folks may say, well, geez, Tim, you sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, there's got to be something to that. There's got to be some bigger plan behind this, because it doesn't make any sense that high a percentage of people would be from all across the country, especially when they're there not to peacefully protest, but to cause problems.
Yeah. And I think that, again, I don't know how I think that there is organization. I don't know all of the details, obviously, but when you see some of these familiar faces, somebody who is arrested in Portland and then the next week they're arrested in Kenosha, is that organized from on high? Is this now like the 2020 version of, going around and following the dead? And instead of, going to see a concert, you burn down a building and that's your world tour. I mean, I don't know, but I do think that there is a committed group of individuals. And look, we're not talking about millions of people or even hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking about, I think, a committed core of several thousand individuals who are always looking for allies, right? They're always looking for new recruits, but that hardcore group of people who really do, I think, want a revolution. I take them seriously when they say they want a revolution. And that they want to burn this down. They want to build on the ashes. They want to replace capitalism with something that they believe is going to be better. But they're absolutely they're not interested in reform. They're not interested in working within the political system. They want to destroy the political system just as they destroyed, some of those businesses in downtown Kenosha.
Yeah, it's amazing to me to try to understand the ideology behind this desire for this revolution, because certainly that these folks can see history just around us. I mean, look what's happened in Venezuela. Is socialism the answer? Heck no. I mean, look, Venezuela is now a carcass of what it used to be. It used to be a hugely rich country. Now it's decimated. Thanks to socialism. Thanks to the lack of the free market. So it just doesn't make sense to me. And unfortunately, I fear that so many young people have grown up in this school system that rejoices in socialism and rejoices in the destruction of capitalism. And so for that reason, there's no logic behind this. It's just pure raw emotion. And that it makes me very nervous about the future for my children.
Absolutely. I think you should be nervous, unfortunately, and you're right. I think that there's a great ignorance of history out there. And unfortunately, in this day and age, you kind of have to want to seek it out. You have to want to learn more. As opposed to just being, spoon-fed the stuff that you are getting in schools. And I think a lot of Americans are ignorant, not only what happened, in Venezuela, but look, I mean, the American Revolution is the exception, if you think about it. Most revolutions don't end up with what they were fighting for. The French Revolution sought to depose a monarch, and they ended up with an emperor. And even in the United States, I mean, I guess you could say, the Articles of Confederation, lasted for 11 years, and all of a sudden they realized, all right, this isn't really working the way we thought it was going to. Now we need a federal constitution. We need a new form of government. So even here we have those examples of the revolution doesn't always take you down that road that you start. There are twists and turns, there are turnoffs, and it's real easy to go down that wrong path. I think the wrong path that they're going down right now is, again, this idea that they're going to spark a revolution. I don't think that's the case. I think that, frankly, I mean, Tim, I think we're seeing a backlash here, and not just from those folks who are, showing up and protecting their communities or showing up and guarding businesses or their homes. I think we're seeing a backlash from millions of Americans who will never go out to a protest. They'll never go out to try to defend a building. They're watching this at home. They're talking with their kids about this, but they see this chaos, they see this disorder, and it scares the hell out of them.
Yeah, it does scare the hell out of them. And the reason that they won't go to a protest is because they're busy running their businesses. They're busy working at their jobs. And I agree with you, Tim. I feel that there is a very powerful, sleeping giant of people that do believe in the free market system and capitalism and old school American values. And I mean, we're seeing that over here at U.S. Concealed Carry in the sense of there's thousands and thousands and thousands of new members who are joining so that they can educate themselves and be a more responsible gun owner so that they can be their first line of defense for their families. And so from that perspective, that gives me hope. And sometimes hope is all you can cling to.
Absolutely. So do you have any advice for those folks who are, they don't like what's going on. They don't like to see this. what would you tell somebody who came up to you and said, Tim, listen, I'm really ticked off of what's happening here. I'm going to take my AR tonight. I'm going down to Kenosha. I'm going to stand guard. I know I don't live there. I live in another Milwaukee suburb, but my town is peaceful. That town's not. I'm going down there to try to restore order. What would you say to that person?
Oh boy, my advice would be to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing before you get into a situation like that. The rules are a lot different nowadays. And unless you're guarding your own business, I would recommend that you proceed cautiously. And if you do, make sure that you have well-established awareness skills, conflict avoidance skills, threat de-escalation skills, because you do not want to get yourself caught up in a riot like that, because logic goes out the window and it's nothing but trouble. So my ultimate advice would be, protect your home, protect your family, protect your loved ones, and make sure that you have your own set of skills that will allow you to do that effectively.
I think that's tremendous advice, and I'm glad that you offered it. And I want to mention, or I want to go back to one word that you mentioned there, and that's de-escalation, which is for every gun owner, for everybody who carries a firearm for self-defense. And I know that gun control advocates don't believe this. I know that they think we're all just a bunch of, trigger happy buffoons who put on a gun every day hoping that we get to use it. That's the I've never met that gun owner, honestly. No. And so I think for those of us who take self-defense seriously, the best way to use a gun is to not have to use a gun, right? You want to be able to de-escalate. You want to be able to remove yourself from those dangerous situations, or to try to diffuse those dangerous situations. And looking around at the country, unfortunately, Tim, I don't see a lot of people who seem to be interested in de-escalation, including, some of our national leaders like Nancy Pelosi are out there saying every day that, President Trump is an illegitimate leader. It seems like the quote unquote ruling class is egging this on as well.
Oh yeah, they are, Cam. They're literally fanning the flames, not just proverbially, but actually as well. And I'll take it back to what you originally said, that your average responsibly armed gun owner, it's tremendous responsibility. And the thousands or the hundreds of thousands that I know are folks that do take it seriously. And I'll tell you what, when you walk around carrying a gun, you are the most polite person that you've ever been, because the last thing on earth that you want to have to do is to use that firearm. And that's what we teach. And it's served us and our members well. You need to have hyper awareness. You need to understand human psychology so that you can de-escalate threats. And honestly, if more people were like that, this country would be better.
Talking again with Tim Schmidt from USCCA, and Tim, one final question for you. You talk about the number of new members to your organization. I'm curious, what are their reasons for joining when they're calling up? Is it just as vague and generic as, I'm a new gun owner and I want to make sure that I know my rights and I know the law. I want to make sure that I'm protected legally if need be. Or is it deeper? Are you hearing stories that are a little bit more personal about, this happened to my friend, this happened to my neighbor, this happened 4 blocks over from where I live? Because it seems like we're dealing with two complementary but somewhat separate issues. There's the political violence that's taking place, but then there's also the rise in violent crime that's taking place in many cities around the country that is not necessarily directly connected to politics, but as police resources get diverted, as police morale, I think, craters in some cities, shootings, homicides. They're at 20-year highs in New York City. They're way up in Portland, Oregon. So what is one side of this coin driving the growth in your membership, or is it just the general unease and uncertainty and unrest that we're seeing around the country?
Okay, I could say it's a little bit of both. So we get about well over 2,000 individual phone calls coming to our place every single day from people that are wanting to learn more about USCCA and what we do. And, it's ironic because in general, it's very common for the human psyche to be in denial about bad things happening to them. And that's a battle I've been fighting for, 20 years since I started this organization. Not in the sense of me trying to scare people, but me trying to say, hey, you should expect the best but prepare for the worst. And so invariably, at least half of the time when people go through their own self-defense awakening, it's because of the very specific incident. And so, yes, we're hearing the stories about people they're living in the suburbs of big cities where the crime is just, exploding. And we're also hearing the stories of like, hey, my cousin got involved in a thing at a gas station. And so they are hitting very close to home. And most of these people, they just want answers. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding firearms. And so many of these folks are calling are brand new gun owners. And so they need the education and training more than anyone. And so as you can imagine, we're rather busy here. We're like a one-arm wallpaper hanger trying to get the job done.
Well, and so to that end, National Shooting Sports Foundation says since January 1st, they estimate 5 million new gun owners in this country. And they say of those new gun owners, it looks like almost half of them are women. Growth among Black Americans in terms of gun ownership, they say that's where they're actually seeing the highest growth. Are you seeing similar trends at USCCA?
Actually, yes, we are. So we in June of this year we had almost 40,000 people join in 1 month.
Wow,
which is a huge record for us. As to the demographics, we don't track all that as close enough where I can give you some numbers, but certainly women are definitely a large growing demographic. We have, in terms of the race makeup of organization, we mirror the exact race makeup of the United States. So we have, we're all on balance on all of that stuff, but really, I mean, to me, that doesn't make as much of a difference as I care more about what's in our members' hearts. And what's in their hearts is that they want to be able to protect and defend their family. That's all they want to do. They want to feel safe and secure. And, I don't care what race you are, if you're man or woman or whatever. Everyone wants that same feeling. They want that feeling of security and control and confidence that they can be, their family's protector. And that's what we do. Absolutely.
That's why I always say self-defense is a human right. It's not a right of the right. It's not a right of people that I only agree with. It's I can disagree with you 100% on political issues, but it doesn't mean that your Second Amendment rights disappear. Again, this is something that I think is vitally important, that we see this at that fundamental level, beyond political ideology, beyond the color of our skin, beyond our gender, that there is that human right of self-defense. And we've got folks out there, so many millions of them. It sounds like a lot of new members there, USCCA, who are fighting to ensure that right remains strong.
Amen, Cam.
Hey,
well
Tim,
said.
Listen, man, I always appreciate you coming on the program. It's good talking with you. Stay safe up there, and hopefully we'll get a chance to check in again very soon. Appreciate Tim joining us on the program today. I know we'll be having him back again here very soon. Right now, though, it's time for today's Armed Citizen Story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We will begin there with a story out of St. Louis. You can see the headline there. No regard for life. Florida police say suspected St. Louis cop killer trying to leave the country. 43-year-old Thomas Kenworthy had not yet been charged in the murder of St. Louis police officer Tamaris Bohannon, but he has been identified as the suspect. And according to KSDK in St. Louis, Thomas Kenworthy, well known to local law enforcement, Kenworthy had already served time for shooting a man during a road rage incident in Florida. He had a domestic violence incident involving his wife and children in 2019. He started off 2020 with an arrest and sexual assault charge in Florida. Several weeks after that, police busted him with what the local media describes as a, quote, arsenal of weapons inside of his car. Then he missed his court date on August 19th. And authorities say he was trying to leave the country. Brevard County Sheriff's Department spokesman, Officer Todd Goodyear, says he and his fellow officers in Florida hope that Kenworthy won't hurt anyone ever again after the ultimate sacrifice that Officer Bohannon made on Saturday when he responded to a call that Kenworthy had once again hurt someone. The 29-year-old Bohannon, father of 3, all younger than 10, passed away from his injuries on Sunday. And again, in Brevard County, Officer Todd Goodyear said of the suspects, he has no regard for life, and hopefully this will be his last stop, and he will not be allowed out to hurt anyone again. According to KSDK, police records show that Kenworthy's criminal history dated back to the 1990s. In 1995, pleaded guilty to his first felony, which was drug possession in Florissant, Missouri. sentenced to 3 years probation, violated that probation about a year later, went to prison for 2 years. Actually went to prison for 2 years on a probation violation, which is unusual in and of itself. 1998, charged with unlawful use of drug paraphernalia, pleaded guilty, sentenced to 15 days in jail in a diversion program. Okay, so a couple of drug charges, young guy, not the best choices, but at least nonviolent crime. Well, until he reached the age of 21. That's when he was charged with 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder, aggravated battery, other firearm and vehicle offenses after police in Brevard County said he and another Missouri fugitive shot a man in a road rage incident. Newspaper Orlando Sentinel reported that Kenworthy was wanted for a robbery at the time. His accomplice was wanted for a killing. The 21-year-old victim told police that he was stopped at a red light when a man in a Pontiac Sunfire started making fun of his Ford Mustang. Yep, just apropos of nothing. Ponder that sentence for a second. According to arrest records, Kenworthy fired a shotgun at the victim and his accomplice, rammed the Sunfire into the side of the Mustang. Kenworthy then shot the victim through an open driver's side window, ran into a wooded area, took a taxi from a nearby convenience store to a motel where he and an accomplice had been staying. He ended up escaping through a police roadblock, but ultimately was arrested for failing to pay the cab driver, according to the Orlando Sentinel. Sentenced to 10 years in prison for the shooting, which left the victim without 3 of his fingers. Served just 6 years, so a little bit more than half. He was charged with a dog attack in 2007 in Brevard County, fined $220, most of which he did not pay, according to KSTK. Spent time in Palm Bay, Melbourne, Florida through 2011, and Palm Bay through 2016 through 2019. 2019, police say he dragged a man out of his girlfriend's bedroom and into the kitchen, tied his hands behind his back, kept his head down, threatening to kill him. He was wearing a mask, but police say that the man told him he recognized Kenworthy's voice, and then Kenworthy took off his mask, sexually assaulted the man, beat him, let him leave only after he had begged for his life. In December of 2019, he was involved in a domestic violence incident involving his wife and children. He had filed for divorce in September. In January, Brevard County Sheriff's deputies got search warrants for Kenworthy's DNA as well as his car. In that vehicle, they found 5 rifles, 2 pistols, as well as numerous rounds of ammunition. Again, keep in mind, he's a felon, so he's not allowed to possess any of these things legally. According to police, he's never really, beyond the 10 years that he was sentenced to for that violent crime where a man lost his fingers, really hadn't faced many consequences for his crimes. And he was back onto the street despite those violent charges from a year ago and less than a year ago. And it was shortly before 6 p.m. on Saturday when Kenworthy allegedly shot at a homeless man in the Tower Grove neighborhood there in the St. Louis area. Officer Bohannon, the first to respond to the call. Kenworthy shot him in the head. Yeah. St. Louis investigators believe at the moment that Kenworthy intentionally lured police to the scene by shooting at that homeless man. Homeless man has not yet been found, but they did find a shopping cart in the alley. Officer Goodyear there in Brevard County says he believes Kenworthy knew what he was doing. Said, quote, he may have been one of those guys who likes to train. He knows to take higher position for a better view, to have a chance to take a long-range shot if he wanted to. He went on to say he's a person that unfortunately should not have been out, and the system failed in some manner. This person who had these serious charges was allowed to not be in jail until he faced them and was allowed to be on the street, and because of that, he left town to evade our charges, went to St. Louis, and unfortunately took the life of another person, and in this case, another one of our brothers, a police officer. So there you go. Yet another case of an individual who should have been behind bars, but instead was out on the streets. And that's why Thomas Kenworthy is today's recidivist report. Now, our armed citizen story of the day, also with a Florida connection, this time from Tallahassee, Florida, where a man who was originally facing charges after pulling a gun on protesters, turns out was acting in self-defense. It's amazing how, sometimes the first details of the story don't turn out to be the whole story. The Tallahassee Democrat reports that after more than 16 hours of silence following the incident, the city of Tallahassee said in a release on Sunday afternoon that the Tallahassee Police Department worked with the state's attorney's office to review what had happened during this, what turned into a fist fight on Saturday evening outside of the Florida Historic Capitol building. The release said, quote, the evidence confirmed the physical altercation between numerous protesters and that individual was knocked to the ground and under attack before lawfully defending himself. Tallahassee Police Department confirmed that the individual with the gun was lawfully carrying a concealed weapon as a license holder. Bystanders say the incident began as a counter-protester walked up to the crowd of roughly 150 people, began arguing with them, taking photos of their license plates. Tallahassee officers already on the scene directing traffic. Videos posted online don't show how the fistfight began, but moments after it did, people started yelling. Woman facing the camera screamed, "He has a gun." As the camera regains focus, man seen holding a firearm pointed at the mass protesters kneeling on the ground, then turns the gun towards the cameras. Officers closed in with weapons drawn, directed the man with the gun to get onto the ground. Officers appeared to handcuff the man and take him away. Other officers told the crowd to disperse. Adam Ferguson, who identified himself as the man at whom the counter-protester pointed the gun, said the man instigated the fight when he shoved a female protester when another protester shoved him back. The counter-protester threw a punch that hit Ferguson's girlfriend. He said, quote, "It was just 60 seconds, but it felt much longer. I don't know why he would bring violence to a peaceful protest. When he pulled the gun out, it all went rank." And he said that he is deeply upset that no charges will be filed. On the other hand, you've got individuals who say that the Tallahassee Police Department de-escalated the situation, that, again, this fight was not started by the counter-protester, that the first punch was thrown by one of the protesters themselves. And again, according to the Tallahassee Police Department, this was an act of self-defense. I am glad that nobody was hurt, as we were talking about with Tim just a couple of minutes ago. If you're going out there looking for a fight, stay home. I mean, I don't know how much more bluntly I can say that. If you're going out there spoiling for a fight, no matter what side it is, whether you want to try to burn it down to start a revolution, or whether you believe that you're going out there to try to defend somebody else's property or livelihood or even the American way of life, if you're going out to start trouble, stay home. Pretty simple. That's the best de-escalation technique that we have. Unfortunately, I think that we do have Americans who want to escalate this. And from, pretty much every sector of society, you can find that. You've got politicians who want to escalate this chaos for what they believe is a political victory. You've got media figures who alternately want to, I think, embrace the chaos because it leads to greater ratings. And then you've got those members of the media who don't want to cover all these protests because they think that it hurts their political side. Again, we can talk about this for hours, but the bottom line is, from my perspective, we do have a First Amendment right. It is equally as important as our Second Amendment right. The right to peaceably assemble, the right to protest is a real right, and I want to protect that right. But again, if you've got individuals within your group who are not out there to peacefully protest, you've got to shut them down. If you've got individuals who are out there not to peacefully protect property, but to try to instigate trouble, you got to shut that down. There are so many divides in this country right now, left, right, gun owners, non-gun owners. There are folks who want to try to make it a black-white issue. But there's another divide. And John Stokes and I kind of talked about this last week on the program when we had him on. I think it was Friday. There's also a divide between those who want to protect their stuff and protect the people that they love and care about, and those who want to destroy it, and those who want the chaos. And I think on that dividing line, the vast majority of Americans come down on the side of, I want to protect my stuff. I want to protect the people I love. I'm not out there looking for a fight. I'm not out there spoiling for a fight. Not out there trying to bring the country down. I'm out there. If I'm out there, I'm out in my front yard telling people, stay away. All right, let's get to today's good deed of the day before we start to wrap things up here. Charlotte, North Carolina, where a Charlotte police officer has helped a homeless woman off of the streets. Her name is Demetrius Gonzalez. She's legally blind and disabled. At one point, she was living in a tent in the woods. And as you can imagine, she said, quote, it was tough. The place was unsafe. Food was scarce. There was really no support. She said, I had nowhere to go. I needed to get help for myself and my sister, who was a heart patient in medical care, according to WBTV. She said she didn't have much hope until Charlotte Mecklenburg police officer Kathleen Caffrey from Police Animal Control stopped by. And Caffrey said, I made it my mission to get her out of the woods. She said, as a blind, disabled woman, I knew that it was going to be very hard, as it would be for anybody, but especially her and her 3 dogs. Demetrius Gonzalez says, they wanted me off the streets quickly. So Officer Caffrey went to work. She created a network of helpers. A lot of nonprofits, churches. They were able to bring Gonzalez and her dogs food, toiletries, offered animal care, wanted to find her housing. Demetrius Gonzalez says what people don't know is that it took them 9 months. But if that Officer Caffrey and the police department had not been there, she would not have found a home at all. And after that 9-month period, Caffrey found Gonzalez a home there in Charlotte. She said, we got a U-Haul. We got all her stuff moved over here. I transported her dogs with the animal control van. We got her settled in. She's doing much better than she was in the woods. And Officer Caffrey said, it makes me feel great. I've never actually accomplished anything this big on the job. Now that I know that I can do it, I'm excited to do it for other people. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, Officer Kathleen Caffrey with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, we thank you for your very good deed. That is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program. As always, we'll be back tomorrow with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Until then, don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media at YouTube. That way you never miss a program. Or if you like the audio version, you can just check out Bearing Arms Cam and Company on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. And also, don't forget, you can become a VIP member of Town Hall Media, get exclusive analysis, commentary, and more. Tomorrow, it's the return of the VIP Gold live chat with myself and Ed Morrissey from Hot Air. I think we might have another special guest joining us as well. If you're a VIP Gold member, look forward to seeing you there. If you're not yet a VIP Gold member, go become one. And that way you can take part in that live chat as well. Until we speak again, be well, be safe, be free. And we'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company.